Hello and Happy New Year to everybody. We have reached the end of this mammoth Christmas session, most of them out roughly on time, bringing us to January the 4th in-game, January the 3rd in real life, and the FA Cup third round. Always an exciting day on the calendar. And today balanced out with some League One, League Two and National League Prem. In amongst those highlights we have, as you can see there, FullofStrangeham, Levi's at home to Foyverton, Jamie's team in an all League One drafter clash. Same in League Two with Ned and Tom Dauncey. Then we've got FA Cup from then on. Only one all drafter clash between myself and Bustin Villa. And a couple of games for Gourlay and Dan Gregory as well. See if they can make it through to the fourth round. In amongst it all, I'm sure I'll be rabbiting on about some of the results over that Christmas period, the start of the transfer window, the first waiver window that's already taken place. And probably some other shit in amongst it as well. So as you can see, this is a pretty big game. 4th v 3rd. Foyster still within touching distance of those automatic places with his games in hand, but one of the trickier games on the calendar for him today, away at a fellow promoted side, FullofStrangeham. I say tough, it's taken him 6 minutes. Already, as you'd expect, from Levi, he's taken a bit of interest in the transfer market, which opened yesterday, the window, or a couple of days ago. Didn't actually participate in the first waiver window. Oh yes he did, no, he brought in Kolasinac. Sorry, immediately forgetting things that have happened only yesterday. But yeah, he was one of 5 that actually picked up players through the first 2-day waiver window. So he brought in Kolasinac for just under 14 million. Marshy brought in Alan Boksic as extra striker cover. I'm surprised he's lasted this long without being picked up in any format, between drafts, waivers, anything. But Boksic now getting his chance to shine in the draft amongst the drafters. Matt Doherty ended up at Norwich. Michael Coyote, young prospect, Conte Thomarse, also in League One with these two. And then, of course, the Egyptian King completing the set. He's now played for Danielsea Y last year, Ipswich fan Wyman, then gone to Ipswich B, and now ended up at the other Ipswich fan at the Tractor Bulge. Loss here for Levi would actually be quite damaging. Despite dominating that half, he's 1 down, and also 4th of the 4 that went up last year. I suppose you could think that was expected, having taken the playoff route. But really, there's very little between the 4 of them on paper, and now very little between them on the pitch. But you'd suggest that Levi does need to win his home games, especially against the other 3, if he's to get back into that promotion hunt, the automatic promotion hunt. Obviously the playoffs were pretty much a certainty. A draw doesn't really do much for him either, or Foyster if he's to close in on the top 2. We said he had a game in hand, this is pretty much it. And it does look like Thomarse and Ellister nice comfortable lead still. Right, come on FM gods, take us to League 2. Yeah. Means we can just focus on the FA Cup in terms of highlights after this. It should be quite an interesting one actually, because both teams have threatened the automatic places at the top of League 2, and you can see Dauncey's actually in them at the moment, but he has played more than anybody, and he's about to extend that appearances lead with this game. Arsened, after a very good start to the year, tailed off for a few weeks, but have refound some form over the past week or so, or over the Christmas break really, he says as he immediately curses him. That's the thing with Dauncey, if he's going to have played about 12 games more than some other teams in the league, at least 3 or 4 more than most, he needs to make sure those points are actually on the board. It's something to protect. Just trying to count how many right backs he's shoehorned into the team today. Just 3. But a bit like Jazz of the Rovers, despite having played more games than a lot, he's put down a benchmark for everybody else. Say I'm one of the teams with a lot of games in hand, but I think I'd rather have points on the board, considering everyone's just kind of beating each other at the moment. There's no guarantee that those games in hand will yield points. Bizarre move for Patrick Vieira, manager of Arsened, there to put Cazorla at defensive midfield and Xhaka pushing on. Maybe he had a heavy New Year's Eve, not thinking straight. There we go. Swap them over once 2-0 down. Solid work, no shots on target. Inevitably, a bit like Levi, Dauncey is bound to be active in the during the transfer window. Already asked for a barrage of profiles from me yesterday. Some players aren't even on the database or are accessible to him, and he still wanted to see them. Such is the scouting acumen of this legend. Already also placed Ravanelli on the transfer list if anyone's interested. Ned, meanwhile, has a pretty settled team, and you'd think that's probably played a part in the much better form this season. But not offered a lot in this game. These players look exhausted, potentially not much rotation having gone on across the busy past 10 days, resulting in no shots on target and no points. Dauncey starts the year very much cemented in the top 2. On to FA Cup. 3rd round, and the reason I chose this for a highlighted game is it's technically National League Prem against Premier League opposition. Brentford have been one of the better sides amongst the non-drafted teams in the pyramid. I think they got promoted from the Championship last year, now thriving in the Premier League. But can they defeat one of the newbie drafters in Gourlayverpool? I mean, we'd quite like Tom's side to go through, just so he can pit his wits against other drafted teams further into the competition. Again, these newbies haven't really had much of a chance to flex their muscles against the original 24, and they can only do so in this cup. That's a great goal. Tom Gourlay's not the only National League Prem side to have made it to the third round. His mate Tom Letcruz also in there. We'll check out his result later. And also Marshy's still there, who, despite being relegated last year from League 2, actually has been pretty potent in most of the cups. I think that's all three centre-backs combining for that goal. Johnny Evans with one of his trademark left-footed rifles into the top corner. Collymore, like Maitland-Niles, opening his account for the team. I'm surprised he hasn't had more game time. I think he was the very first draft pick for Tom when he started building this team. He has barely played, certainly hasn't scored, but the fact that he is now getting a bit more pitch time as part of a front two, it's usually been Demba Ba up there on his own, and as I say that, Collymore goes off injured. I'll shut up. If I can dare speak now, it looks like a comfortable win for Tom's Gourlayverpool. Centre-back's trying to combine again. I think that one's offside, but pretty impressive, as he has been most of the year, to be honest. And he'll hopefully get a decent draw in the fourth round too. Looks like we're saving the best game for last. That's nice. I'll be honest, there was a little less logic behind picking this game. We've only got one all-drafter clash in the FA Cup, which obviously I was going to choose, despite it ending in disaster for either me or my good friend Paul. Other than that, Dan Gregory just had a little less airtime over the Christmas period, so I thought, bit of a London derby away at West Ham B, why not? Can also go through a bit of pyramid admin during this game, including any transfer dealings so far. This obviously went through the first wave of pickups earlier. Other than that, we've seen Levi depart with Alan Gomar, sending him off to Italy. So technically he is now available in the waiver window. I'm not sure anyone's going to be clamouring for him, but you never know. And then the other dealing between former enemies, now seemingly business partners, Jamie Scales and Thomas Keeble, with Jazz of the Rovers and Thomarse. And it's seen David Rocastle go from League One Thomarse down to Jazz of the Rovers. I think it's his third team he'll have played for since the original draft. I think he was at Leeds United as well last year. Or was it? No, it might have been Dauncey's Devils actually. Maybe it's his fourth team. He's been passed around. But that was a deal for about 15 million. With rumours of a gentleman's agreement that if Thomas ever wants him back, he can just re-sign him for the same amount. Which, bearing in mind, he lost 3 midfielders to injury over the weekend, or sorry, during the week. Who's to say Rocastle won't be back in London by the end of the transfer window? The other bit of admin to share, just ahead of the scores that I'll go through later, is that we do actually have a manager under threat. Amorim at Manchestaff, I've said before, has been insecure a couple of times. Not only is he insecure, but my sort of floating manager profile keeps getting asked now about whether his job is in danger, whether I'd be interested in taking it. So I do think maybe a Manchestaff loss today, following 2 recent losses, might be enough to get him sacked. It's possible. And that was over far too quickly. Sorry, Dan. Well done. Unconvincing, but in the 4th round, before I could even talk about it. Less than 3 minutes that game took. And it's accelerated the trip to St James's Park, where, like we have many times over the years on various FMs, me and Paul are up against each other. We used to actually have to have a vow of silence during our games at uni, because it used to just get a bit too aggressive and aggy. Unfortunately, you can't silence me at the moment, Paul, because it's my thing. We both hit a bit of form over Christmas, actually. So in theory, this should be a pretty decent game. That being said, all 4 today have been pretty drab affairs. Except the fact that we've got to the 5th game of 5 within 16.5 minutes. Usually we're at about 28 by then. Fantastic dive by Kieran Dyer there. Going back to this sort of transfer dealings, one drafter who decided to, I don't know, catch people's interest yesterday was Dan Calver at Dan City Cal. Transfer listed 5 players, including Van Hooijdonk and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank of all players. I can't imagine he'll be without interest. I'd say Paul would be one of the prime candidates if he is having a look to update his team in January. He did struggle with formulating a potent strike force over the summer. He's ended up with Mark Hughes and Samuel Eto'o, which is definitely his best partnership. But you'd suggest there's room for a Jimmy Floyd there. Is he offside? I think so. He has struggled with injuries this year, Paul, so I think this is about the best lineup he could hope for. John Terry back, Frank Lampard back, in the middle with Petit. His best strike force, Poborski and Overmars on the wings. It'd be a cracking 90s team. And at the moment, he's heading for the 4th round. And the good thing is I can't hear him celebrating. So after this game, we'll go through the other FA Cup scores, then work our way down. I think there are a few other League 1, League 2 or National League Prem games to cover. Let me just check. Not League 1, I think AFZ, AFC, Wimbledon and Dan City Y are both in action in League 2. Not sure against each other or separately. And then Nottingham Giant Forest, OTB Craig and the aforementioned Manchestaff in National League Prem action, with the latter potentially seeing a manager sacking. We'll cover that at the end, after all the league tables. That would as a reminder, be the first instance where a manager has actually been sacked, and Liam would then have to choose a replacement across any of the currently available managers in the database that I created, not the whole of FM World, so former Premier League managers who are currently unattached. Will he stick with someone who picks a back three for the third time? He's already gone through Glenn Hoddle and potentially Amorim. Will he change formation? Get Beckham off that right wing back slot? Can I force a replay? I presume we are at replay territory in the third round, or has that rule been changed? Not sure I'm going to get the chance to find out. Especially not with Joe Linton now up front. Surely there was a better option than that. Oh my god. Balak's XG must be higher than all of Bustin Villa's. Martinez having an absolute stormer. This could be it. At least this has been a somewhat more entertaining game than the last four. I mean, obviously not for me. It's been utter bilge, but for others maybe. My cup form's so bizarre. I managed to win a Champions League, but in domestic cups, I can barely win a game. Well done, mate. Enjoy the fourth round. And now, as Paul knows, we sit stewing in silence for at least the next hour. And then he makes me a cup of tea. Right, on to the other FA Cup games. Let's see if there are any fallers amongst us, apart from me. Cheshire's in, nice and comfortably. Klinsmann brace, and there's a Szoboszlai goal as well. Interesting to see that most so far that we've seen have taken the cup seriously. Not really much rotation going on, other than my weird strike force decisions. Thomarse in FA Cup action will need a replay. You expect a home game against Burnley A should be fine. No place for Coyote in the first squad since his arrival. Chris Wood cancelling out Giroud's opener. Another team heading for a replay, Marshy. It's not out though. Bit disappointed to have let a 2-goal lead slip. Edgar Davids, every time he seems to come on, he seems to score. Yapstam, the main culprit, as he was in the last round as well. Horrendous mistake made against Ned, forced a replay, and now he's got himself sent off and done the same again. And another replay, a more surprising one this. You'd have expected Ellister to have seen off Nottingham Forest A, but Dougie Freedman has contributed to an unlikely draw. Again, Not much rotation to suggest that result was on the cards. Of course, these are all games we could do without. And another one. Another win. Jack Harrison making sure that that Nico red card was punished properly. That will be a tricky game going away to Aston Villa B. But as things stand, the 3 remaining National League Prem sides in the FA Cup are still in the 4th round draw, at least. Another one. Injuries galore. This might force people's hands in the transfer market or the waiver window. Mings and Bruce both having their ankles broken by Ali Adier by the looks of it. A brace for the Frenchman. Cancelled out ultimately by a late Berbatov equaliser. Jazz of the Rovers won't need a replay. El-Hadj with a late winner. Almost did. Any place for Rocastle in the squad? No. Don't really need to look at Norwich's 2024 team. Another team going to a replay. That's going to be a highlight-packed features reel at some point soon. Again, it took a late-ish equaliser in a game Louis would have expected to have won. Is that it? No, Lawrence is through comfortably. Isak, Anderton and Freddie Canute, always nice to see. Going well in the league, going well in the cup. Lawrence did say yesterday that he doesn't anticipate much movement in the transfer market. I'll believe it when I see it. He can't resist, can't help himself. Good win for Calver as well after a tricky Christmas period really in the league. Lost to Sheffield Wednesday B recently. But a nice brace from Van Persie seeing off Stoke. And actually one of the banana skins of the round, I'd have said. Paul Hasselbank crying his eyes out on the bench, having learnt about his transfer listing. Any more for any more? Boji! Through to the next round. Despite a horrendous Gareth Southgate injury. Poor lad. Any fun names for him today? Not really. In fact, just didn't bother making any substitutions at all today, Benitez. Through to the 4th round. I think that is everyone. Alright, let's League One it. If I can spell league. Any other games today? Nope. League 2, it was Sig against Wyman. And it's the home team that came out on top despite more shots from Wyman's boys. But an injury to Norgard and a red card from Yaya Toure, who did score his goal, helped Sig see out another win, adding to his victory at the weekend. Must be knocking back on the door of the playoffs again. Now, down to the National League Prem. I mean, that is a good win, but I have to say I'm a bit disappointed we won't see whether there is a sacking or not. Andy Cole potentially keeping Amarim in a job for at least another week. Very bizarre results elsewhere though. We'll come to this one first. Nottingham Giant losing at home to Bournemouth B, who was one of the teams to have beaten Liam recently. Taking scalps over the Christmas period. But that, if I saw correctly, is not the most bizarre result of the weekend. This one is the first loss of the season for Craig's OTB Craig team. Clint Dempsey tried to drag him back into the game at the end, but just looks like a really under par performance. This is what happens when Carlton Palmer doesn't play. 39% possession, same amount of shots, and that is the last unbeaten streak gone. Just go up to League One, look at the table. So you can see there that the draw obviously did absolutely nothing. Foyster still does have one game in hand. If he wins that, he would go up to second, but Thomarse really has reversed the early season form to stake his claim for that promotion spot. Down to League 2, and Dauncey now sits top, but has played 3 more games than his nearest challenger. 5 more games than Warringham in 3rd, 7 more games than Lawrence, who's in 5th, and 9 more games than myself. So he's there for the taking, but points on the board. I'd be happy with it. And as I said earlier, AFC Wimbledon, 6th team, back into the playoffs, and it's so tight there. Only 2 points separating, was it 6th and 11th? And that doesn't include the likes of Louis, who's got a lot of games in hand, and indeed Wyman. And National League Prem, there's a 1 in the lost column. Didn't think we'd see it at some point, but 28 games later, Craig has lost, and it's opened the door slightly to Marshy. There's only 1 automatic spot available. 11 points in it. That could go down to 5 if Marshy won his 2 games in hand. And there you can see that Manchestaff's win today, not enough to get them into the playoffs again. But probably not enough to get him sacked either. In fact, there are no sackings today. So I'll leave you there. Back in touch with the FA Cup 4th round draw over the next few days. We've also got EFL trophy action, league action during the week. And we'll see if you're subjected to my voice again. For now, I'll leave you there. Happy New Year.